Hey guys, welcome to the party. We are the Weekend Rockstars. We're a podcast for upcoming musicians and artists, giving you all the tips, tricks and licks you need to get you set up in the music scene. I am Scott Freeman, as always, it's Billy wearing his t-shirt Deadman. How you doing, Billy?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Scott.
Yeah.
Very well indeed.
Fantastic. So today we've got some really interesting stuff to talk about. We're going to be getting into the topic of how to start bands. And I know I've got a lot to say in this topic. And Billy's probably been in more bands than me, so I expect you have a lot to say as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I don't think I should probably have a little count how many I've been in.
You've been in quite a few. I mean, since I've known you, you've been in like...
Okay, let me
you've been in
think.
3 main ones, but you've been in a bunch of little other ones.
1, 2... I guess 5. 5 officially.
Yeah.
And then maybe 6 or 7 make it unofficially.
Yeah.
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 Cool. So we're going to get into that in a sec. But first off, we're going to jump into a little bit of news because it kind of feeds off what we talked about last week. So in last week's podcast, we talked about how to get gigs. And there's been some news in the last week, Billy.
There has. It was announced like 2 days ago, I think it was, that in the UK at least, we can now start having outdoor gigs from, I believe, the 25th of July. So that's good news for obviously musicians and bands. It's going to be tricky, obviously, because there's not going to be many places to play.
Yeah.
I only know of maybe 2 places that have an outdoor stage.
Yeah.
And they're obviously really lucky in that they have that. But if you think about how many bands there are out there, the competition for a gig is going to be fierce. But it's good news. Gigging, it just proves that gigging will start again. It's like there is light at the end of the tunnel. And hopefully you can start using them tips and tricks and licks we gave you last week.
Yeah, no, we really got into it last week, which is really fun. It's exciting that there's some places that can be opening up again for gigging. I mean, yeah, you're right, there's not many places that do have outdoor stages. I know a couple, mostly down Winchester way. I guess there's some that have beer gardens that could set up temporary stages if they want to do that.
Yeah.
You also have, you have those gigs that you get on like little pavilions, at parks and things like that. So they might bring stuff like that back. Down in Winchester, there's a town sort of adjacent to it called Eastleigh, which is kind of the equivalent to Staines here, I guess.
Yeah.
And they have got a little pavilion there where they have bands play in the summer in the park, which is pretty cool. So I see stuff like that happening a bit more.
Yeah.
Whether that means festivals.
That's what I was thinking, because all the festivals cancelled for the year.
Yeah.
And now they must be like, oh, well, we could have, if we held on just a bit, we might have been. But then, I mean, they haven't really announced what the rules are in terms of social distancing yet.
Yeah.
So there's going to be limits of how many people can even be there, probably.
Yeah.
And how do you even stop people from wanting to get up cless to the barrier if it's a really popular band or whatever, You
just imagine, at the barrier when you've got a band on stage, and then you got the huge crowds and the people up at the barrier and the security guards, all with their arms crossed, ready to throw you back in if you crowd surf up to them. You can just imagine them now with just a thing of disinfectant in one hand and a cloth there, so they throw you back in and then they spray the rail. It's just madness. It's just, festivals are just a massive meat cluster, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
It's just loads of people shoved in together. I just don't know how you can do that with social distancing.
Yeah, you're bound to catch just a normal cold at a festival.
Yeah.
So, I think festivals could be probably a no-go for this. But I say, I think these pavilions and things, I think a lot of that will also, a lot of those spaces are probably owned by the councils and stuff. So I don't know, it's going to take some entrepreneurial promoters to theapproach the councils to set up a show maybe in a park or whatever.
Yeah.
And follow all the safety proceedings. But there's a demand for it. I know there is. People want live music. People want the gig. So I feel like someone out there is going to start making things happen in that regard.
Yeah. Do you see yourself trying to get one of these outdoor gigs?
I would love to be that person, but I have too many other things going on at the moment.
Yeah.
With work and stuff. So yeah, I'm sure there's gonna be people out there that are already looking into how they're gonna do it.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, I've spoken to one. He lives miles away, but
Yeah.
like for me, I'm not gonna be able to do a gig up there. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Cool. So, if everyone listening, if you want to get out and get gigging again soon, and you're just bursting for a gig, there going to be some outdoor shows again. So, might be a bit difficult finding someone who's putting one on, but you never know. If you know someone, go for it, and let us know in the comments. How did it go? Cool. Right, Billy, we're going to get into the topic for today.
Topic
time. So we're going to talk about how to start a band. So my first question to you today, Billy, is how did you start your first band, and how did you start your last band? First band first.
Ooh, first band. Let's go back in time.
Yeah.
To a young 16-year-old Billy. Or was I 17? Maybe I was 17. Just fresh out of high school. And there was a young chap in my year who had won the Canterbury Idol competition that year, which is essentially just like your pop idol type talent show that the school puts on.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was friends with him, and I was chatting to him on MSN. Can you remember MSN?
Oh, I remember MSN.
That's a throwback.
Yep.
And he was saying, wouldn't it be fun to jam? And I was like, yeah, basically we got chatting, and we were like, let's have a little jam. Because I had a bass, and I'd already been playing bass, like, and learning how to play it, the last couple of years at that point. And so yeah, basically I took myself round to his, and somewhere along that line, another good friend of ours, he called us up and was like, oh, what you doing? And we're like, we're starting a band. Yeah, I mean, it's like, I want to join. We're like, what can you play? Can you play the drums? He's like, yeah, I can play the drums, but he hasn't got a drum kit. I was like, well, my sister's got a drum kit, but it's like a child's drum kit, and she doesn't play it. So basically, we kind of stole her drum kit.
Yeah.
Took it round to the first friend's house. We all got together and we started a little kind of like a punk band.
Okay.
And we were terrible, literally terrible. But from those little seeds came not even Mighty Oaks, really, because I joined other bands after that. But no, I mean it was just a laugh, really. At first, it was just like three high school friends jamming in my friend's rec room. We used his like stereo as a PA, which was just awful sounding. It didn't work at all.
Yeah.
And my friend completely trashed my sister's drum kit. It was absolutely wrecked. But luckily, I mean, she never played it, so it was she kicked off about it.
Yeah,
but
as you would. Yeah,
it's rock and roll.
Yeah,
rock and roll, sis.
Yeah.
So from there though, like we wanted to get a bit more serious, and so we decided to give ourselves a name. We went with the name Distant Red.
Distant Red.
Distant Red.
I don't know what that means.
I don't know what it means either, but that's where we went. And we had songs such as "Soldiers of Love," and I can't remember. That's the only song title I can remember at the moment.
Sounds like a disco song from 1976.
Yeah, I think I can sing a bit of the chorus for you.
Yeah.
We are the soldiers of love. I can't remember something like that.
I think you should bring that back, Fuzzwalker.
Yeah, maybe. Anyways, from there we decided basically the friend who was playing drums, his name was Hamish.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't like he could play drums, but he wasn't like brilliant. So we decided we needed to get a better drummer, and he could play lead guitar because he was much better at guitar. So we drafted in the only drummer we knew, which was this girl from our year at school as well. Mm-hmm. And she joined the band, and she was pretty good for her age as well, and like we were just a scrappy young punk band.
Yeah.
It all fell apart after we entered. We did a couple of gigs, right? And at this point, actually no. Think about this. I'm delving back into my mind here, right?
Yeah.
So we did a gig, a party, at my friend's house, the singer's house, and that was a laugh. But there was a big disagreement between the two other fellas over whose guitar amp was whose. They had the same guitar amp. It was
that's annoying.
It was ridiculous. They had a big falling out, and Hamish left the band.
Right.
So I believe it was something like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, we then this comes up a good point, right? Because then we needed to find a new lead guitarist.
Yeah.
How did we go about doing that? Obviously, this advice is not as relevant for this day and age because the internet wasn't as much of a thing back in 2005.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, but it wasn't. Also, it wasn't. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was like one way that we did it was we put an advert in this free music magazine that you could put adverts in for musicians, almost like a classifieds type section, you know.
Yeah.
And from there, we found a guitarist called Tad, who's also a really good friend of mine, and we recruited him. He impressed us. He was great, and we're like, right, this is the new band, Distant Red 2.0. Right, and
was that the official name of the band?
No, it's just it was the new lineup, you know.
Right.
From there, we did do 2 gigs. We did 1 gig at a local youth club, and this was my first taste of like gigging, right? And I loved. I obviously had gigged at the party, but this is like a real gig on a stage.
Yeah.
And there's lights and there's proper sound and like I was rocking out on stage and there was some young kids jumping into the music. I was like, oh, this is the shit right here, right? So that taste there was what drove me to want more, you know. Yeah. Anyway, the next gig, this was not a good gig, Scott.
No.
we entered one of those like Battle of the Bands, and I feel like Battle of the Bands is going to have to be its own topic at some point.
Probably,
right?
Yeah.
Right, we entered this Battle of the Bands, and we ended up playing at a Gilhooly's Irish pub. I should say everyone, I used to live in Australia, so all these stories are coming from Brisbane, which might not make a lot of sense unless you're from Brisbane.
Lots of Australian references.
Yeah.
Shout out to our Australian audience.
Yeah, shout out to the Aussies. So yeah, we played this Battle of the Bands at a Gilhooly's, right? Mm-hmm. And we got through like I think 1 song or maybe like 1.5 songs, and we got told to stop. We were like, "What? Okay. Why?" And they're like, "You're too loud." I'm like, "Too loud? We're a rock band, you like dicks!" Like we started kicking off, and at that point, the drummer Angela quit because she'd had enough of the hijinks and the. I don't know if it was her fault for being too loud as well, because she was. The thing is, we were a rock band. Like, I didn't know there was gonna be like a levels, like like a volume.
Yeah,
level thing.
Some venues can get funny about that.
Yeah, it was bizarre. It was weird. We were just young and stupid, and we kicked off a bit, as a punk band would.
Okay.
And got kicked off the stage, and then Angela quit, and that was the end of Distant Red. Because then I quit as well.
Yeah.
Tad quit. That was that.
The red went off.
The red went off
into the near distance.
Yeah.
And okay, so that was your first band. That was interesting to hear.
Yeah.
How about your last band?
Last band.
Yeah. How did that get started?
So the newest band I'm in, I guess, would be Brave Rival. Mm-hmm. The blues band.
Yeah.
And about was it 2 years ago? I guess it was early 2018. I think.
Yeah.
I feel like that's right. Yeah, so basically, Donna, the drummer, was already in a 3-piece with herself and the 2 singers that are in the group.
Yeah.
They were doing like acoustic gigs with Donna playing guitar and playing these songs, and they decided that they wanted to start a band. So they were looking for musicians, and because Donna and I had previously been in a band before, she, and also we were already in another band at that time anyway, she knew that me and her could lock in nicely on the bass and the drums.
Yeah.
So she reached out to me and asked me if I would like to join. And I was like very flattered, and I was like, yes, definitely, let's do this. So from there, I then went along to like a first rehearsal with a couple of other musicians that they had already sort of asked to audition. So they were like local musicians from the Portsmouth music scene. And the jam went very well. We all connected up pretty good. And I believe they sort of met those guys at open mic nights. So open mic nights is quite a good way of meeting musicians in your area, to just meet other people that might not even be in bands, and they might be looking for a band themselves. So that's, if you are looking for musicians, definitely check out the open mic nights. So yeah, from there, that's how Brave Rival got started. Eventually, the two other musicians and the sax player we recruited all left, and we recruited Ed. And now we're a 5-piece, and I think that's the best lineup currently. So
okay, so it started out, the band didn't have much to do with you to begin with. It was Donna and the girls, and then slowly more musicians came towards their centre of gravity, including you, and then that slowly morphed into what it is now.
That's right.
So it's been a bit of a metamorphosis with that band, hasn't it? Yeah.
I think if you wanted to talk though, Scott, about starting a band from scratch, I think the best example is going to be my other band that I'm in. Okay. The old Fuzzwalker.
Okay.
Because that band was a project that Donna and I started together, because we were in a band before that as well. Yeah. And we decided we wanted to start a new band. So basically, how did we go about doing that? And we decided that we would use the internet as the primary way of like sourcing musicians. Yeah. I put out adverts on joinmyband.com, which is a great website for finding musicians in the UK. Yeah. You can like go on there and you can search by area, and you can place adverts on there, or you can read adverts that are on there with people that are available.
Yeah, I've used it a couple of times before. Yeah,
it's definitely. I would imagine most people use that site nowadays to start bands in the UK. Yeah. I'm sure there's similar sites in other countries. But this is how we started Fuzzwalker. So we found for Fuzzwalker, we found an advert for. I put an advert on. I got some replies, and one of them was from this guy called Matt. And he said that he also knew this other guy called Matt that he'd found via Join My Band. They hadn't ever met before, right? But could they come and try out? And we're like, yeah, sure. So first Matt came along at the train station. I picked him up, and then second Matt, which is the Matt that's in the band, also came along. They'd never met before. We all met each other for the first time. Went back to Donna's studio to jam and try it all out, and it became evident to Donna and I that we gelled best with second Matt. Yeah, not so much with first Matt. He was a lovely guy. If you're ever listening to this, Matt. Yeah. It just wasn't. It wasn't you. It was just wasn't right. So yeah. Anyways, from there, like we had this audition, and then I feel like it took a couple of weeks for us to go back to second Matt and say, listen, would you be up for starting something with us? Because we feel like it went really well with you. And he said yes. And from there, we were like a 3-piece, just writing songs and that. And then Matt was adamant he wanted a 2-guitar band. Yeah. So we put another advert out for a lead guitarist, and I believe we tried out a couple of people before we got to Carlos, but they weren't really right. And eventually we got to Carlos, who had just moved over from Spain, and he was the man, and that's how Fuzzwalker was born. Eventually Carlos left the band as he was in another band for his uni. Yeah. And then from there we found Ed, and Ed was not through joinmyband.com. Ed was he had his own profile on this website. I think it was like Star Now. That was it. And Donna had an account on there, so she was able to message him
Yeah.
And from there, we basically got Ed in. But before we got Ed, we did do a really funny audition with a guy that we the guy answered this ad, right, and I guess I should have put on there that we were looking for people of a certain age, like younger people, because this guy was fairly old.
Yeah.
When he turned up, and like straight away, this isn't gonna work. But he was very adamant. He still wanted to like play, and he wanted to show us his rig, which was like literally the loudest rig I've ever seen, and it was just really awkward.
Yeah.
So my advice there is to try and suss out if they're the right demographic for your music before even auditioning them, in a way. I don't know, to avoid the awkwardness. We ended up like trying to. It sounds really bad, but we ended up coming up with this cock and ball story that Donna was having like a hypo and couldn't make it to the audition.
Yeah.
And it was a bit stupid of us. It was almost like something from a sitcom. It was like ridiculous.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're in all three stories there, from your first band, your most latest band, Brave Rival, and then your other current band, Fuzzwalker. There's a lot of there's quite a variation there. I mean, it started off obviously when you're a teenager. A lot of your bands start for just people that you know, your friends,
definitely.
and then sometimes that can be friends of friends that join, and then they become your friends, and then you're talking about their that sort of kind of mercenary kind of style of
gun for hire,
putting out adverts and join my band and saying, hey, come join my band, and then doing auditions, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. With Ed and Matt it worked out, but with other guys it didn't work out so much for you. It's an interesting place to get to.
Yeah, you got with auditions. I've been auditioned myself to join bands, and obviously I've auditioned other people to join my bands.
Yeah.
So I've been on both ends of that stick, and I think it's important that everyone's honest with each other. I mean, I say that when we weren't particularly honest about Donna having a hyper.
Yes.
But that was just a really crazy day. That was, but it's just, I think it's just important that everyone's clear of each other. If it's not working, I think you can tell anyway a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But if it's not working out, you can sort of tell, and the other people can tell as well, I think. And just go your separate ways, and you'll find the right band.
That's
think
it.
When you're trying to start a band, if you are a musician that's trying to start a band, the most important thing I think is to get yourself out there and meet other people via adverts, via open mic nights. And meet like-minded people who share the similar music tastes. And start writing together, really.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to chat about, when it comes to getting new people into a band, say, because I don't often play with a band. I occasionally have a backing band, and have worked with several great musicians over the years with that backing band, and some not so great musicians over the years with the backing band. But I have three qualities that I look for, and I might have told you this before.
Okay.
I picked these up from a podcast I was listening to about with a comic book artist called Dave Gibbons, who actually he did Watchmen with Alan Moore in the 80s, and he says, there are three qualities, in the industry typically. Number one, are they a nice guy?
Yep.
Number two, are they shit hot? Are they great at what they do? And number three, are they reliable? And he says, if you've got two out of the three, you'll do all right. If you've only got one of those, you're really going to struggle to make connections and work. And he says, you should strive to have all three.
Yeah.
You should strive to be the best you can at what you do. You should strive to be really reliable, and you should strive to just be a nice guy. You know, I mean, do you agree? Do you think there's more qualities, or what would you say to that?
I think that is definitely there's definitely three qualities I look for. The reliability thing, I guess, ties into commitment. being in a band is a big commitment. It's like being in a relationship with like 3 or 4, maybe more people.
Yeah, just without the sex.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Sometimes with it.
Sweet.
You know, is it Fleetwood Mac?
Fleetwood Mac. Yeah.
Or ABBA. They were married, weren't they?
Were they?
Yeah,
I don't know that much about
two
ABBA.
couples. I feel like.
Wow.
But yeah, it's. I think the commitment needs to be something that's like, if you're going to be in a band, you got to think about commitment levels. Yeah, and I think there's red flags sometimes with bands, because like obviously, if you start having loads of arguments, then that can be a real drain on the creative process and just the vibe of being in the band. You want to being in a band's supposed to be fun, you know. So that's always important. If you got a real hothead in the band, that can be really difficult. I've been in bands with a real hothead.
Yeah.
And that makes life difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's those are the sort of things you want to look for, I think, when you're auditioning. Those 3 qualities, definitely. That's really good advice, I think.
Yeah. So, would you say there are 2 qualities out of those 3 that are more important than one of the others? Do you think it's better to have someone who's really nice and really reliable than really good? Or do you think they need to be really good all the time? Because I tell you, the amount of people I've worked with, most of the time, they have 2 out of the 3. I've worked with a couple of people who only have 1 of them, you know, but most of the time are 2 out of the 3. I don't even know if I'm 3 out of 3. I try to be, you know, but, you know.
I would say, for me, I would definitely be looking, I would put more weight on the really good.
Yeah.
And the really reliable.
Yeah.
As I mean, I don't know, like, who's an arse? You don't tend to come across many arseholes in music.
But you just said a second ago, you know, you come across a couple of hotheads and a couple of personalities that split
but
it
in
apart.
In a weird way, that's stuff that comes out later, not generally in the audition process, you know?
Yeah.
They're already in the band. They're already in bed with them at that point.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, those sort of arsehole tendencies might not become apparent until much later, really. So when I'm auditioning someone, I think I'm really looking if they're talented, they can play the instrument better than anyone else.
Yeah.
And what's their commitment like? Are they really enthusiastic to join the band? Are they really enthusiastic about the music that you're writing? That sort of thing. I think being a nice person, I think everyone should be a nice person, and generally,
you should strive to be.
Yeah, generally, like I feel like everyone is, but like the weird tendencies people have to be arseholes don't become apparent until later in a lot of cases. Like, it's just one of those things in life, isn't it? Like,
I've definitely found that with recent memory of being in bands.
Yeah.
You'd never know till much later on. So, I don't know. To me, I've worked with a lot of people who've been really nice and really reliable, but not that good, you know? And it means that we get a lot of stuff done. And sometimes, like, they'll get better as you go along. Sometimes they don't, you know? You know, and it is a real struggle, because I've also worked with people equally who are really nice and really good, but just are never there, you know?
Yeah.
And some of these are good friends of mine, you know? And, you know, you're just like, we're not getting anything done.
The reliability thing is like probably the most important. I mean, you could be an average guitar player or average bass player, average whatever, you know, but if you're really reliable and you're really keen, that probably goes the furthest, I think, with bands. And I think one thing that a lot of bands don't do, or they make the mistake of doing, is they don't practice to a regular like schedule.
Yeah.
And that can, like, I think that's, if you can commit, everyone can commit to doing at least once a week rehearsal, then that goes a long way to giving the band like its legs at first, like, because you're constantly meeting up, you're constantly writing, you're constantly practicing for gigs, and I think that's probably really important, especially like in the first band I was in that was really serious, that we committed every Sunday, rain or shine. Even if the public transport which I had to get was not working, I'd make it work. I'd have to get to practice.
Yeah.
And that went so far with making that band a solid unit,
Yeah.
So I think commitment is probably the most important.
Okay.
Even though I do look for talent first. I mean, immediately you're going to look at the talent, aren't you? So
Yeah.
I mean, you can tell straight away if someone's good or not.
Yeah. So summing that all up, what we're trying to advise here is that you try to aim to have all three of those qualities.
Yeah.
That's what you want to have. You want to have the full package when you're presenting yourself. I mean, part of finding a band is finding the right people, but you've also got to look inward as well, and you've got to look at, what qualities am I bringing, So if you know you're a person that struggles with punctuality, you gotta work at that. If you know that you're not quite as good at your instrument as you could be, or not quite as good on stage, you got to work at it, And if you know that you're a bit of a grump,
Yeah.
and you're not the biggest fan of people, then maybe consider becoming solo act. No, you gotta, just find, you gotta find a way into it, and so, try to be nice. Try to be the best at your instrument you can be, and try to be as reliable as possible. If you go for all three of those, I think you'll do okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So the next topic ties a little bit into what you're saying there about rehearsal, Billy, about rehearsal space.
Yeah.
Okay. And so my first question is, where should you rehearse as a band? That might seem a bit obvious, but I think some people might not know. Where do you go to rehearse?
I mean, I've tended to always go to a rehearsal studio that's set up purely to be a band rehearsal studio.
Yeah.
Whether that's been, I've been to various different ones all around the place, really.
Yeah. So you think that going to a rehearsal studio is better than doing it in someone's garage?
I think so, because I mean, if you're doing it, it depends on the garage, really. But a lot of the time, you're going to be worried about the neighbours, or you're going to be worried about most of the neighbours. You don't want to be making loads of noise and upsetting the neighbours.
Yeah.
I know that the term garage rock came from bands that started in garages, but at the end of the day, the rehearsal studios that are set up properly, they're going to have a proper PA in there. Usually they'll have a drum kit set up that you can use, they're ready to go. And I think paying for that rehearsal space as well does focus people to actually work harder, to work for it more. If you're doing it in a place where you're not paying for that space, then you run the risk of everyone sort of slacking off a bit more. Yeah, I think, in my experience anyway, that's something I found.
Yeah, because one of the rehearsal spaces you use, right, on a regular basis, do you guys pay for that?
We do. It's a reduced rate, I should say. Because basically, we're very fortunate in that Donna's husband owns his own rehearsal studios. So we do pay him, though. At first, when we started these bands up there, he wasn't charging us, but in the end, it just got a bit silly that he wasn't charging us, so we've started paying him just
cool.
for the space and that. So...
But yeah, I think you're right. I think when you have to pay for a rehearsal space, it makes every minute count.
Definitely.
You don't take it for granted. You're not slacking off. You're like, right, we're here to work. Definitely. Over the years, used several rehearsal studios. And we used around here. There's a studio. I don't know if it's still open, called Airplay Studios. It's
still there. It's got a new owner now.
Oh really? Someone bought it.
Yes, I don't know how they're doing stuff during the
quarantine,
the quarantine pandemic of 2020.
Yeah,
but they're still there.
Okay, that's interesting because I did a lot of my first rehearsals there, and obviously moved away to Winchester. Wasn't in a band for a few years, and then I was like, oh, now I've got a band. Where do we rehearse? Started rehearsing in my basement to begin with.
Yeah.
That started, peeing people off. So we were like, right, let's rehearse somewhere else. I was like, oh, where do we go? And we found a studio called Swerve Jam in Basingstoke, and we started rehearsing there.
Yeah.
And Swerve Jam, that was good. But again, it's expensive, and I was actually, for the most part, I was paying the full fee for the rehearsal studios myself during those days, because this is the complicated relationship I have with having a band, because as a solo act, I write the songs, and because of that, I get all the royalties for the songs, and so every quarterly I get a check come through for a couple £100, which the other guys aren't getting because they don't write the songs. So part of me is like, I need to be the one that's paying for these rehearsals, so these guys aren't emptying out the money out of their pockets. Occasionally they'd want to help out and everything, but those were expensive days, man.
Would you say the basement's the strangest place you've rehearsed?
The strangest place I've rehearsed? Oh man, I mean, there's been lots of garages, there's been people's back rooms, people's bedrooms, all sorts of stuff like that. The basement was an odd one, definitely.
My weirdest one, going back to just after Distant Red had split up, back in Australia, and me and Tad decided we were going to start a band, and we were like looking for musicians, and that band eventually got some musicians, and basically Tad teached guitar at a local music shop to my house, and when they were closed, we would go and open it up and rehearse in the music shop.
Oh wow. That's pretty cool.
I like the owners. I'm not sure if they were aware or not. I feel like they were aware.
Yeah.
I never met them. Maybe they weren't aware though. Maybe we just were like using Tad's keys.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a fun time. Sometimes you get people walking past and they're like, "What's going on there? Oh, this band sounds pretty cool."
Yeah.
So yeah, that's probably the weirdest place. Yeah.
Okay. So do you think it's important to use the same rehearsal space as a band? Do you use the same one each time, or do you think you can keep switching up every week, use a different rehearsal space? Do you think that's important?
I don't think it's that important, really. Like Fuzzwalker's rehearsed at many places, like the place you were saying, Airplay. We rehearsed at a place in Woking. Which I was very impressed by. I thought it was a really, really cool place. I think it's called The Rooms, I think.
Okay, never heard of that one.
And obviously Donna's husband's place. It's never really been that important where we're rehearsing, really. Just as long as we're together and writing tunes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Right, so here's another question. For swerving off rehearsal space for a second, when you start out the band, what do you start when you start a band up, a new band? What do you start off with? Do you start off with originals, or do you start off with covers?
That's a good question. I mean,
and what's the benefit of doing one or the other first?
I think generally, in most bands that I've been in, it started off with there already being a songwriter in the band that's written something for us to jam to, generally. But obviously the advantage of doing a cover, which would tend to happen as well, is that it's a song everyone knows, and you can sort of play, if you all know the parts, you can play it and see how it sounds. So, for example, with Matt and Fuzzwalker, he's a massive Oasis fan, so we could sort of jam out some Oasis songs that he liked and me and Donna liked, and that was how we sort of gelled over that.
Okay.
But he also had songs as well that he'd written, so that was quite an easy way of getting to know each other musically, I guess, was through both of those ways, really.
Yeah.
I can sing. I have a very vivid memory of actually my first audition for the band I was in the middle of all this is Albany Down.
Yeah.
My first audition, my only audition with them. I started. I got the bass and put it on, and I started playing. I knew that they were into Led Zeppelin. I remember someone saying that in an advert or something like this. So I thought I was just going to play Whole Lot of Love.
Yeah.
I started playing Whole Lot of Love, and then Paul started joining in on the guitar.
Yeah.
And then the drummer came in and the singer, and it was like, yeah, this is cool. We all like this, and you know. And then obviously we played some originals that they already had as well. So it all sort of fell from there, really.
Yeah.
I think both are important.
Yeah.
Yeah. In like a musical handshake, getting to know you. If no one's got any originals, I feel like it's just a weird thing, like, in a way, because usually I would say 90% of the cases, the guitarist or the singer has written something, and they're gonna want to show it to you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Most of the time, I think in my case, I'm all about the originals, and so very rarely do we inject a cover in there. Usually a cover will come in much later down the line, but we're starting with new bands, we tend to jam, just get in the room and start just jamming, and usually a song comes out of that, because I'm quite quick with the lyrics, so I'm able to just spit stuff out, and maybe by the end of the session we've got something working. And I always find that's a real bonding experience. Whenever we've got in the room and been able to create a song out of that, especially when it's like the first session of the band and maybe people don't know each other that well. By the end of it, you've got this thing that you've all created together, and it's quite a special moment. So whenever I get a new band in the room, I try to do something like that.
Yeah, like have a jam. Yeah.
It's been different since I stopped doing just normal bands and started doing my stuff and getting backing bands in, because I don't do as much of that anymore. It's less about creating an identity for the band through new songs and more just about learn my songs.
Yeah.
So that's one of the downsides of it. I guess if it was a more collaborative sort of backing bands, solo artist thing, maybe we'd do stuff like that, but it's like, got 3 albums worth of material to learn, let's get to it. So
you were in bands obviously before going solo. So in those ones, like, did you start with covers or did you start with originals?
We started with originals. The sort of hard rock band These Are Teeth I was in before. For months before that happened, our guitarist Bickley and bassist Tom, I'd been in bands with Tom before, and I'd known Bickley for a while, and we jammed, but we were just on nights out, and they'd be like playing demos of like these songs that had been writing together on their phones. I'd be like, oh, that's cool, and then I'd just go away and write lyrics in the back of my mind, and then they'd be hanging out again, and then I'd just be like, oh, by the way, I wrote some lyrics to that thing. They're like, what? And I was like, yeah, and that was just my way of slowly trying to get in on whatever project that it was they were doing. And eventually we came together in a room, got a drummer Robin in, and just we jammed that song, built that together, and then just kept jamming more and more. It was, that band was late. I'm not even sure I sat down by myself and wrote a single song for that band and go, hey guys, here's a song.
It was way more collaborative.
It was way more collaborative. It was really fun. I think maybe later on we did this one song called Surrender. It never really worked, but it was, most of the time it was a very collaborative thing, and so very fond memories of that band. We did what cover did we do? We did Boys Are Back in Town.
I remember that. Yeah.
We did Boys Back in Town. We did All My Life by Foo Fighters once as well. And those two were really fun to do. But I just never enjoyed them as much as doing the originals. And plus it didn't feel like us. It felt like, because the core of the band was this really spontaneous, get in a room, jam and create a song in 2 hours kind of energy. Then when we sit down for 2 hours and learn a cover, it just didn't feel like us, and it kind of felt like, we have to learn a cover because you need to have at least one cover in your set if you're doing mostly originals. Do you find that, as doing an originals band, you need at least one token cover?
I think there is a kind of weird science to it, because a cover can go down really well at a gig, especially like a pub gig. But I think generally the best covers tend to be ones where the band has completely turned the song on its head and made it into something new. Or if you can't do that, if you can't make it your own, just try and do a cover that's like you all know it really well anyways before you even start doing it. Like, you don't have to learn it, you already know it, so you just play it, you know, and then it's kind of your version anyway. If you have to all sit there figuring out how to play this song, it's probably too difficult to learn, and it just kind of kills the vibe a bit then, doesn't it? So I remember trying to learn Bridge Burning, the first track off Foo Fighters'
what's it, Wasting Light? Was that the name of the album?
I
Yeah,
think
that
so.
one.
Yeah,
Wasting Light
yeah.
is the first track on there, and it's got this really cool chromatic riff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and just trying to learn it in the band I was in at the time, and a guitarist just stomped out because he just couldn't get it. And I was just like, let's just do what we normally do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's tricky. Okay, here's another question, and this is one we start getting to topics now, which kind of get into the small conflicts that can come up in the band as you try taking it a bit more seriously and try designating roles. So the next question is, who does what in the band? You know, is it important to designate roles within the bands? You know, like one person writes the songs, you know, one other person books the gig, somebody else books the rehearsal room, someone else books the, you know, makes the merch. Is it important to designate so everyone has their own job, or, you know, does that make life easier or harder, or is it everyone's doing a bit of everything? What's your experience with that?
It's a real mixed bag of experience, I'll be honest. Like, everyone's going to bring something different to the table, and everyone's going to have a different sort of skill set in that way. So it's really difficult. It's like saying like Fuzzwalker, I tend to be the manager / like organizer of most things of that band. So it's kind of been like my baby in that regard.
Yeah.
But then and then for Brave Rival, that position sort of fallen to Lindsay. It's like it's her baby. So she looks after nearly everything. So I feel like in most bands, a leader does tend to emerge.
Yeah.
Who is like the ringleader in a way.
So that's sorry, go on.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be the person that writes a lot of the music. I think when it comes to like writing songs, you do sometimes tend to get one person maybe that does write a lot of the music.
Yeah.
But I think if everyone can collaborate as well, that's very important. I think because sometimes some of the best songs will come out of left field. You know, that the main songwriter might not have even been thinking about. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So it's interesting you say like Fuzzwalker's kind of your baby, like you are sort of the unofficial manager, and Lindsay is kind of that has that role in Brave Rival, your other bands. Was that obvious that was going to be the dynamic of the band at first, or was that a slow slide into those positions for each of you, do you think?
I feel like if for Fuzzwalker, it was kind of obvious from the beginning because I was the one organising auditions. And then I just also was the one that started organising gigs, and everything else, you know. But there were certain jobs which I couldn't do, and so I had to. And it's kind of like those jobs that I can't do because I just don't have the skill set. Fell to other members of the band. So, for example, I don't know how to really do video editing. Or even music production stuff. I obviously know I know the basics of recording, but I don't know how to like fine tune everything and mix it and all that. That all fell to Matt because he learnt all that at university. So he knows how to do mixing, knows how to do video editing and even graphic design. I can dabble in bits of that, but I'm nowhere near as skilled as him. So a lot of that to make everything look and sound and feel good fell to him. And then other little jobs we would divvy out sort of thing to other members of the band. Ed, when he joined, he was very keen to take on doing Instagram posts, for example, and he sort of divvy out it came to me to sort of divvy out the tasks in a way because I was quote unquote the manager. With Brave Rival, Lindsay has just taken the ball and kind of ran with it, like and it's all the better for it really because she's so enthusiastic with everything that the band's doing. So she literally she bought a screen printing press last week. She's making our own t-shirts and we're going to sell them.
That's cool. She can do that.
So and she handles like much like myself. She handles all the gig negotiations. She handles all of that really, and then. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with this with my train of thought. I sort of lost it there.
I guess, in my experience, I've, in pretty much, as far as back as I can remember, every project I've run with, I've been kind of the unofficial manager, keeping everything together, organising stuff, rehearsal rooms, things like that. I mean, it's not been that universally all the time. There's been other times other people have done other small jobs, but for the most part, I've been the one keeping the ship sailing, and I kind of like that because there's like a level of control to it that's kind of nice, but also can also be kind of stressful at the same time. It's just like, why am I the only one who's doing this? And I think part of why I do what I do now, mostly by myself, is because part of it just got tiring. It got tiring of doing it and carrying the whole weight all the time, and it felt like, because other members of the band saw you doing it, they didn't get involved. They just left you to it, and I don't know whether that's out of laziness or whether it's out of, he's got his thing, he's handling it, so I'm just gonna not get involved because I don't want to step on his toes. What do you think of that?
You sort of got on the point that I was trying to get to, and then my train of thought sort of went. Is that I think it is important for, even though like someone's gonna inevitably be the leader, it's important for the people that follow to support that leader in a way, like with doing other tasks and also just offering support and advice, and also just staying on, like being on top of things as much as they are in terms of like knowing what's going on, what's happening, and also just helping in other ways. Like, for example, when it comes to Brave Bravo getting gigs, it is generally left to Lindsay to sort out. But if I know someone, if I know someone that can get us a gig, then I'll ask them, and it shouldn't be just falling down to them. And for other things as well, like we're going to be recording an album. We're all trying to research like different producers we could get in touch with about recording. And it ended up coming down to a guy that me and Donna knew from back in our Albany Down days. And I reached out to him. So like I took the initiative and supported the band in that way, and found us the producer we're going to use later in the year. So I think it's important for all members of the band, and it comes back to that level of commitment that we're talking about. It's important for everyone to be committed and everyone to support each other, because at the end of the day, you're a team, and if only one person is carrying the load, it's going to buckle eventually. I mean, they can carry the lion's share, but it's important for all the members to support them.
And it's important that you discuss these things in the band, because sometimes these can be like almost unspoken dynamics. Everyone knows, that person in the band's the person who does everything, but you never talk about it because it can feel a bit awkward sometimes, so you don't bring it up, but in order for it to survive and grow, you have to talk about it. It has to be out in the open, because we've had that before, and it can be really tricky. You got to be really clear, like who's running the show here.
Communication, it's like if anything in life, communication is one of the most important things. Honesty, communication, integrity, and that sort of thing goes a long way to making sure things don't go wrong, I guess.
And these are some of the things that aren't immediately obvious skills you're going to have to develop when you join a band. You think, you see your favourite band on TV, you see Nirvana or Guns N' Roses stuff, and you see the rocking out, the glamorous side of it, and you think, I just need to be good at that. But then, like, the hard reality is you get in a band, and actually it's dealing with difficult personalities.
For sure. It's literally, you're in a relationship with 3 or 4 people, as we said earlier. It's like, some people are going to drive you absolutely nuts. At the end of the day, like, it happens in every band. Just like being in a relationship with your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, it could drive you nuts. Like, so yeah, it's clear communication is so important in that regard, and hashing out when there is a grievance, like what you can do to fix that. And you've tapped into our final topic, which we're coming into now, which is the hard conversations. Okay, so this is the tough stuff. So I'll open this one up by saying I've been in relationships with girls in the past and had to break up Yeah.
You know, had to be the you know, the person that does the breaking up, and it's hard, and you don't feel good about it because you know you're going to hurt the other person, and you do it, and usually, at least for me, in those circumstances, I don't tend to see that person again, or at least not regularly.
Yeah.
You know, that's the end of that dynamic. I actually find it harder to kick people out of bands than I do to break up with girls that I might have been in love with. I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's so difficult, because a lot of these times it's not because they're really horrible. It's because the dynamic of the band's not working. You know, we've been in a band together for 6 months or whatever, and either they're just really unreliable, or they're just everyone else has clicked and's got really good, and that one person's just dragging it down. And now it's my job again as the unofficial manager of the band to break it to them. You know, you know that this isn't working out, and I have bungled it.
Yeah,
probably nearly every time.
Yeah,
you know, you know, it's been as bad as me saying, "Oh, the other guys wanted you out. I think you're great." You know, because the thing is, I still want to be friends with this person after it, but I've got to break their heart, and it's like breaking up with someone, but just worse, because it's just like, but I still want to be friends. But the band becomes this special thing, doesn't it?
Sure.
It becomes this thing that you look forward to. It becomes this community. It becomes like this gang, this family. It's like you're kicking someone out of the family, and it's just hard. And you know, in the past I've said, "Oh, the band's splitting up." You know, and they go, "Oh, that's a real shame." And then 4 months later, we'll reform under a different name, but without that member, because I found it so hard to just say you're out the band. You know, I've sent text messages with other members of the band saying, "Oh, I don't know how I'm going to break it to them that they're out of the band," and accidentally sent that text to to the person that were kicking out the band. I've like every bad mistake in the book I've done, and it's hard. And
learn from Scott, people. Don't do these things.
Don't do these things. So it's it's so hard, so hard. So what are your opinions on that? Do you find it as hard? Have you had to do it before?
Yeah, I've had to do it. Like the two most recent examples, I would say, are from my two most recent bands. When Carlos left the band, I mean, basically it was really obvious that that Carlos being in two bands, and he was way more focused on his other band. It was just really obvious, and he couldn't really commit to doing rehearsals once a week. So basically, Matt, Donna, and I had discussed it, that we needed to. The only way to move forward really was to replace him, even though we didn't really want to, because we thought he was so good, he was so talented.
He was great.
He had such a great energy on stage, and we loved him. It was just like the only way we could really move forward and let him move forward with his band was to cut those ties there, really. And the way we did it was we just said to Carlos, you know, can we talk about this? And you know, we sort of brought it up with him naturally at rehearsal. He agreed. Like, he didn't want to drag us down. We didn't want to drag him down, and it was very amicable. And we just said, look, do you mind staying with us until we find someone new? And he was happy to do that. And then we found Ed quite quickly after that. And then we said, look, we found Ed now. So we're all good to sort of split and part ways. And it was amicable. In a weird way, though. I mean, like a lot of times when you break up with people in bands, you don't tend to see him very much anymore, because he's in a totally different world to me, you know. So I see him post stuff on Facebook or Instagram, but I don't hang out with him because we're not in bands anymore, you know.
So that's the thing. If you've recruited someone through Join My Band or something like that, and your relationship is based solely around the band, say you weren't friends before, when and if, you know, that person's getting kicked out or something happens there, you know, maybe it is a bit easier, because you go, well, it's the end of this dynamic. We're not going to have a friendship after this, really, are we? You know, we're still going to be acquaintances, but really, you know. So, but when it's like an actual friend, you know, have you had that before, where you've had to really, like, you've had to kick a friend out?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, going back to Distant Red, right?
Yeah.
So when that sort of split up, it was so Angela left the band, and it just left me, Tad, and David, the singer, and me and Tad decided we didn't want to do it anymore. So I sort of just texted him, even though Dave was a good friend of mine at the time. I kind of had to break his heart a little bit. I was like, look, we don't want to do Distant Red anymore. So we're both out. And after that, he dropped me like a stone. I was no longer his friend in a way. Like, he didn't want to hang out anymore, sort of thing. He was more busy hanging out with other friends he made at uni, which is, hey, it's just the way life goes. Sometimes you go your separate ways, you know.
So you didn't reform 4 months later as Distant Blue.
No,
it's the same lineup just without him.
No, it was me and Tad went in a totally different direction with the music. Really, we're doing really weird psychedelic stuff we were doing at the time.
Yeah.
And thinking back to other bands that have broken up, like Albany Down, I don't speak to obviously speak to Donna because we're in bands together.
You still
I feel like Donna and I, we've been jam like in bands together so long now that if we were to like all the bands broke up, I'd still be friends with her.
Yeah.
Unless,
that's cool.
Unless it was a really weird, crazy, angry breakup of some sort. I don't know. But with the singer from that band, I'm still quite good friends with him, and I do see him once or twice a year. So I still feel quite close to him. But the other guitarist, don't talk to him really anymore. So it's just weird how life goes like that sometimes. Like you break up, and then like once you take away the band, you have no reason to be with those people anymore. That's just life, isn't it? So So
I definitely think, you know, if you've got to fire someone from the bands, you know, actually your way of doing it, of the four of you talked about it together, and it was kind of a amicable thing. You know, I mean, that's nice. I mean, there's no guarantee it's all going to happen.
It could have gone another way. It could have gone Carlos, like, he's not this type of person, but imagine he like kicked off, what do you mean I'm not committed, this is bullshit. Like, I could never imagine him doing that, but like, that could happen if someone was that way inclined. But I think you do run the risk of like the gang up in a way. If someone doesn't want to leave the band, then and everyone's ganging up on them, then they're probably going to leave in a bad taste. But then there's not going to be any real right or wrong way sometimes, you know. Like,
so there's no easy way to do it.
Like in that run, it was a bit easy in a way because like it was so obvious that it had to happen, like for both sides. I don't know. Like I'm trying to think of one way it's gone really bad, kicking something out, other than that was, I mean, that Distant Red one was just the end of a band anyway, so
but I guess, you know, for you guys listening, you know, just from what we've said from our different stories, you know, unless it's an amicable thing and everyone knows that it's time for the band to come to an end, you know, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard because maybe that person doesn't want to leave the band, that doesn't know that it's coming. You know, it's tricky. It's just one of the hard things of life. It is like breaking up with someone.
Yeah, it is.
Especially if it's a band where you have had fun together and have had lots of cool experiences, you know. It's going to be tricky. So it's something you got to know going into bands, that sometimes these hard things can come up. Which brings me on to another question on the hard talks, okay? So my question is, what do you do when someone in the band has written a song you don't like, and what do you say?
Oh, that's a tricky one, Scott.
How do you deal with that?
I mean, it has happened, I guess. I do have to sort of say something if I'm not feeling a song. Like if I've genuinely tried and it's just not really working for me, I just have to say, like, this isn't. Maybe it's a certain part of the song that's not working for me. And I think, like, going back to communication, it's so important that everyone's honest about something. And if you're not feeling a verse, you're not feeling a chorus, say, like, this isn't working. Can we change it? The other person should be open enough to be like, yeah, let's change it to work for everyone, sort of thing. So if they're not, then you're just going to get more and more drama, really. Like,
Yeah.
there's got to be compromise on both sides sometimes.
So do you feel that as a band, compromise is key, or do you think actually compromise is one person's creative vision?
Yeah, it doesn't. I guess, like, I can think of other times where I've been real hot-headed and I've refused to compromise on a certain section of a song. I'm like, no, it has to be played this way because it's so good. And I know that person wants to do it this other way, but I'm like, for me, I was like, no, it just completely changed the song. It would completely ruin it for me.
Yeah.
And I've been a real tit about it, but in the end, I was proven right. Because it ended up being kick-ass. But I don't know. I'm sure there's times I've been wrong as well. So it's a difficult one in that, like, it does happen. But I guess that also there's going to be songs that you love more than other songs anyway. So it's I think if you got more than 50% of the band not digging a song, though, it's definitely not working. So,
yeah, it's definitely not working. Yeah.
So that's. I mean, there was a song on All Be Down first record, the Train song.
Yeah.
Which was written. It was basically a riff that the singer had, and he didn't turn up to practice. So we decided to turn it into a song to spite him.
Yeah.
A ridiculous song about a girl getting hit by a train.
Yeah.
And
I love that song.
And it ended up being really popular, but obviously he hated it. And then I noticed, like, I've had a really weird relationship with that song because I sort of wrote the ridiculous lyrics for it.
Okay.
And
I didn't know you wrote the lyrics to that one.
Kind of, yeah. Like, it was mostly me.
Cool.
And yeah, like, I've gone from, like, loving it to hating it to loving it to hating it. Like, you get, like, Donna hates that song. She had no part in writing because it was two drummers before her in that band. But like, and obviously the singer hated that song, and I've met other people that didn't like it, but then I've met people that love that song. It's just such a weird thing for me. Like,
those are some of the best songs, though, these Marmitey songs, because
it is a Marmite one.
Passionate reactions on either side.
It's such a silly song. It's ridiculous.
It's great. I just love how you. I love it when the song is about a certain, like, the Machine Gun song by Hendrix, and he creates those sounds on guitar.
Yeah.
You know, I love it. Like, it's the Train song, and there's that really fast rolling snare part, you know, in the sort of interval sections there. That creates that train sounds. Like, I think that's part of why people probably love that one, because it sounds like a train, you know, it's just really cool, you know. So it's difficult talking to people and saying, I don't like this and I don't like that. But it depends on how sensitive the person is, because some people can just brush it off and go fair enough and move on to other things. Other people can take it really personally. You know, I've gone into, you know, when I've been in bands that are a bit more democratic, where I come in with a song and they say whether they like it or not, and they say they don't like it, I can take it. I used to take it really personally. Yeah. You know, I don't know what that would be like now. Yeah. You know, maybe that's why I've done it the way I have, because now no one can tell me no, I don't like that song. I'm sort of tough. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so we've got one more question in the sort of main topic, and then we'll get on to the question that we've been given by one of our listeners. Yeah. So the last question in the Hard Talks: when do you know when it's time to call it a day on a band?
I think it's one of those things where you just kind of, like, you get this feeling, and, like, it's if the band's arguing a lot, or there's most of the band members are not interested in getting together anymore. It's like, you can kind of tell, like, it's becoming more and more of an aggro. It's not fun anymore. You know, it's just stress all the time. Then it's pretty obvious it's time to move on, really. So in some ways, isn't it? Like, yeah. And I mean, things having not made it, like, quote unquote, like, massive. You know,
Yeah,
I'm sure there's other factors for big bands that come into play, like money, and that sort of malarkey, touring schedules, where they're touring like hundreds of days of the year. So I'm sure those sort of things coming, but at grassroots level, it can just generally be like you all get a bit shitty with each other, and it's just obvious that it's time to move on. Really, if it's not fun, it's not worth doing, is it? So
yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, money is part of it. I think when you get to a bit of a larger level, you know, as we talked about last week, you know, getting money for gigs, you know, can be an interesting experience. You know, negotiating that. But definitely, we've had, you know, since making money from gigs, you know, it's been difficult because, you know, we've had different setups where we go, right, all this money goes into a pot and it sits in this pot, and this money is specifically for band stuff, so no one gets paid for gigs. Just money goes into a pot and it pays for rehearsals, it pays for recording, it pays for la-di-da-di-da. You know, strings break at gigs, you take money out the pot, stuff like that. So we've done it like that before, and it's been really hard to maintain from time to time. You know, and then there's you divide all the money up and hand it out to people, but then when it comes to actually paying for stuff, it's actually tricky to bring the money together. You know, and so some of the times, you know, wanted to do things with certain backing bands, but there's not been a lot of money there, or just the fact that we held the money to spend it on band stuff. It's tricky. You know, really hard to just go, what is the way through this? You know, what is the perfect way of having a band and doing it? But I don't know if there is one. It
depends what everyone agrees on, really, for that sort of thing. Like with Brave Rival, like and Fuzzwalker in a way, everyone was just on board with starting that band kitty and topping it up, and then using it for things that we needed, like whether it might be recording or making an advert on Facebook or stuff like that, like buying merch. And so it saves us having to put into our own pockets because it's coming out the kitty, you know. I think it's a good exercise in management of finances. You know, like, and it's also quite gratifying when if you say you do buy like a bunch of merch that you're going to sell, and then you sell it out, and you've made a little profit. You show that the band is profitable in a way. So
okay, cool. So that's our last main topic of the day. So we do have a question. I think maybe we touched on some of the things in the question early on, but we can come back to it. So what's our question, Billy?
Yeah, we had a question from a Lindsay from Portsmouth.
Okay.
She said, how do you approach musicians in order to start a band if you don't know anyone or you're new to an area? And I think I did touch on this a little bit, but what would you say?
So obviously you mentioned open mic nights, didn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, being a solo act, I intended to do that for as long as possible, but then I went and played a bunch of gigs, and people would come chat to me at the bar after my set and go, man, if you ever need a drummer or a guitarist or a bassist, I'm totally in it. And
so they were those people going to the open mic nights looking for musicians?
Yeah. And so that's how I've met a lot of my friends over the last 5-6 years, just at gigs. It's how I met Gareth, you know, and a couple of other people. You know, they just chat at the bar afterwards, and then it can end up like that. So, you know, but I guess for me, that's special circumstances. I'm a solo act and I go out doing my thing, so I'm showing my music and my act off to other people. But if you're not in that situation, if you're a bassist, how do you start? I think Join My Band is actually a really good one. I think, you know, it's a bit scary because it's anonymous, it's the internet, who knows who you're gonna meet up with, so you might
be safe in that regard.
You need to be safe. You need to do some background research. You need to go on Facebook or whatever to check these people out, you know, and that you're not getting catfished, whatever. You know, you got to do some research there, you know, because you never know what you're gonna get. We had a drummer audition for us through Join My Band, and he was a lot older than us and from Eastern Europe, and it was a weird dynamic. He was a nice guy, you know, but it never really worked, you know. But, you know, I wasn't 100% sure what he looked like when he showed up, and we were doing a rehearsal at a guitarist's house. The audition was there, and it wasn't obvious where the front door was in the house. It was one of those houses where everyone comes in through the back door instead of the front. Right. And so he was like going around in circles looking for where to get in, and I was looking around for this guy that I wasn't 100% sure what he looked like. And then there was this bald fellow who kept going round and round the house, and I was just like, I don't know who this guy is and why he keeps going around here. And then eventually he goes, "Are you Scott?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Are you the?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Mate, I've passed you like 3 or 4 times going around the house." It was just, it was bizarre. So I don't know. Yeah, join my band's good, but make sure you know what the person looks like first, and make sure you do a bit of background research on them. Or, you know, if you are a singer and you play guitar, go play an open mic night and try and network that way. I think that's good. What would you say, Billy?
You could also go like sliding off the open mic night. You could do the Keith Moon technique.
What's the Keith Moon technique?
Now this takes ultimately it would take a massive amount of balls to do it.
Okay.
And you have to be incredibly good at your instrument.
Yeah.
But the legend goes, I guess, or how it went, is Keith Moon went along to a Who gig. Okay. Or it wasn't the Who at that point, I don't think. But obviously it was Pete Townsend playing and whatnot in this band with the other people that were there. And I think Keith Moon just went up to them after and was like, "Your drummer's shit. I'm much better than him. let me be your drummer." And then that's how they got Keith Moon, apparently.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow, that sounds like an incredibly Keith Moon thing to do.
That's called the Keith Moon technique of joining a band.
Yeah.
just telling them, "I'm better than that person. I'm going to join your band."
Yeah. My world, what a wild cat.
Yeah.
Okay, so just to sum up everything we've talked about today, we've talked about how to start a band, we've talked about our first band experiences, and how if you're like a teenager starting out, you'll have your school friends, or maybe you're in your later teenage years or your early 20s, and you just know people. That's one way of doing it. We've also talked about how you can advertise and join my band, which we've both done to varying degrees of success. You never know what you're going to get, really.
Yep.
But it's good to try out that way. On top of that, we've talked about rehearsal spaces and whether it's good to actually use a proper rehearsal space over just like your bedroom or something like that. We definitely recommend that you get a decent rehearsal space and pay for it, because actually when you pay for it, every minute counts. You're paying for this time, so hopefully you'll use the time better. We've also talked about what you play when you start a band. Is it important to start off with covers, to have some common grounds, or is it important to jump in and do original songs and really form a personal identity for that band? And that's really up for you to decide. We've both got different opinions on that. And also, like, who does what in the band? Who is the sort of unofficial manager of the bands? Figuring that out, and then actually having active communication in the bands. It's good to talk about, who does what here. Is one person solely doing it? Are they happy doing that? Because stuff like this, if it's not talked about, can lead to the band splitting up, and that's just sad. And then we also talked about the hard things to talk about, such as when you have to fire someone. Never an easy topic. There's really, neither of us have great solutions unless it's amicable.
Yeah.
And we've established that I find breaking up with someone in a band much harder than breaking up with a girl in real life. Anywho, so thank you very much for listening today. We've been the Weekend Rockstars. Leave your questions in the comments below if you are listening on YouTube. Of course, if you're listening on any of the podcast services, you can send us a question to scottfreemanmusic@gmail.com. Send us a question about next week's.
Where can they follow us on Twitter?
On Twitter?
Yeah, have you got a Twitter handle?
I have a Twitter handle. My Twitter handle is ScottFreeman0. That's the number 0, not the word. How about you, Billy?
I am at DangerBase9. That's bass BASS.
be a double S9.
Danger Base 9.
Danger
A
Base
9 with a numerical 9, I should add, actually, yeah.
So that's interesting that we both have Twitter handles that end with a number.
Yeah.
So I got Scott Freeman Sierra, you've got Danger Base 9, so you can follow us there. Obviously, subscribe to us here on YouTube. That's youtube.com/The Scott Freeman Music. Subscribe to us there. And yeah, if you've got any questions that have come out of this week's podcast about starting a band that we didn't cover, then leave us a question below and we will endeavour to answer it in the next week's podcast. Till then, I've been Scott Freeman.
And I've been Billy Debman.
And we are the Weekend Rockstars. Peace.